Hey everyone, welcome again. I've been doing these for so long that I feel like I need to change my inflection of how I say hello every time, just so it doesn't sound like it's a old radio show. But you know,
I can do it. I'll take over from here, right?
Okay, well you go for it.
But leave all of this so far, right?
Oh yeah, no, I'm keeping all this in, definitely.
All right. Hey everyone, this is Sean Murphy here with the BATTASS Batman Animated Series podcast. Like I said, I'm your host, Sean Murphy. See, if I did this every week, I would know how to clean
it's
that
not that easy, is it?
No, it's not. With me, as always, is my co-host, Clay McCormick. Clay, how you doing?
Good. You know, I was driving way too fast the other day through a school zone. And, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's the point of if you're getting introduced, you have to take the conversation and steer it in a completely unpredictable direction. And then it's my job, or usually your job, to get us back on the rails.
Right. Well, the rails today are 2 episodes of Batman, the Animated Series. We're getting close to the end. We've only got three podcast episodes left, and then we are done with Batman, the Animated Series. But today we are doing, I just scrolled past it and I forgot what it was. Okay, here we go. Old Wounds and The Demon Within, which are 2 very different but interesting episodes. So,
it was a good week.
Yeah, so we're going to take a quick break and then we'll jump right into Old Wounds.
Like the man says, give till it hurts.
And another loser bites the dust.
Old Wounds, written by Rich Fogel, directed by Kurt Gaeta. And in this one, when on patrol on his own, Robin runs into Nightwing and he tells Robin the story of how he and Batman grew apart. The story reveals how Batgirl discovered Batman and the original Robin's true identities. That's a frustrating sentence. And also explains some of what went wrong with Barbara and Dick's relationship. It's also a little bit...
if I was you...
Go ahead.
If I was you, because you just gave me the opening ability here, I would have said, Sean, why don't you tell us what the episode is, and then have me make it up.
I'll remember to do that for the next one.
I'm never ever opening this show ever again.
It also is strange because it says reveals how Batgirl discovered Batman and Robin's true identities. Batman just told her. She didn't really discover anything. It's not like she did any legwork there. But
well, there was time. You could tell she was in distress, and he gave it a think, and he's like, maybe this is a good time to let it. Yeah. He thought about it.
But this is a really interesting one because one of our biggest criticisms of this season is that so many of the episodes feel like they are very light on substance, and this one is the complete opposite, where it's very heavy on substance. There's a lot going on in this, a lot of character stuff.
Yeah.
One of the big questions coming out of the end of the last season was, who knows whose identity as far as Batgirl and Batman and Robin go, and they answer that question.
Yep.
They answer the Nightwing question. Although it's weird that this one, like, we're going in the order of that's on Wikipedia, which I think is production order. But even still, the air date order for this is pretty deep into the run, and it feels weird just because this almost feels like it should be the first Nightwing episode, but it's like the second or third or possibly fourth. Yeah,
like I thought we skipped The Demon Within because on HBO Max it's sort of earlier on. But I'm curious the real answer to how do they intend for this all to roll out? You know. Were you supposed to get this episode first? Because we had gotten so much with Nightwing and with the new Robin, Tim Drake, that when this episode aired as a kid, I'm like, okay, this has like a shopping list of things that it has to get through because it has built up a lot of questions at this point. You know, I'm going to assume this was intended to air at least halfway point. So they did they did probably want to introduce some things and then get to these answers later on. And this is the episode where they answer all your questions.
Yeah. Yeah, it felt to me like it should have been earlier only because Nightwing's attitude at the beginning of this is kind of in conflict with how they've portrayed him up to this point.
Yeah.
Because he's been pretty cool with Batman in the episodes we've watched. And it seems like at the end of this is where you get to see where he becomes cool with Batman after he sees what Bruce has done for the guy.
Yeah, he's forgiven Batman. This is the story of how he forgave Batman. But in a way, this episode's nice because it didn't ever bother me that it seemed out of place. Yeah, it's all a flashback anyway, so this episode could fit in seemingly anywhere in the series, and you would be fine with it.
Yeah, it is fun too because I feel like one of the other questions in this season that gets brought up pretty quickly is how come Batgirl's hanging around with Batman so much after there not being that much crossover in the last season? So they answer that question, which is good too.
And when they did the one that I love, where everyone knows who Batman is, Gordon's going after him.
Oh, yep.
They have a moment in a cave where Batman and Nightwing and Batgirl are taking a moment to think about everything that's happened, and she seems to know. They all seem to know who Bruce is, who Barbara is. Like the cards are already on the table at that point as they regroup. So I guess this one would technically take place before that one. I don't know. Yeah. That's the tricky thing about TV at this time is this isn't like a serialized show, so it doesn't really matter what order. Yeah. And you and I were watching it on syndication, so they were all out of order anyway. It just didn't seem weird, whereas now when things are released on Netflix all at once, there's definitely an order to follow. Right,
yeah. Would you say that this episode was a large influence on your version of Batman as featured in White Knight?
Oh, really gruff, you mean?
Yeah,
over the top.
This episode felt like, this is what your Batman and Dick Grayson relationship is kind of built off of.
Yeah, there's a really great line at the end when Dick is about to take his mask off and quit. Batgirl is saying, like, Batman didn't force me to do this. I chose to do this. And Dick's like, you don't know him like I do. He makes you think that it's your idea. He manipulates you. And, like, he's just sort of glaring at Batman. And I thought that was really potent. Even as a kid, I was like, oof, that's a good line.
Yeah, I find that's one of the things I find really interesting about this episode is it almost feels to me, I don't know, because we have talked about that Batman in this season is a lot colder than he has been in the previous seasons.
Right.
But they really turn it up on him in this episode in a way that I almost felt like was kind of out of character. Mm-hmm. Because he's always been kind of cold, but I've never really felt like he's come off as manipulative with Robin or Batgirl or anything. But I guess, like, in order to tell this story, you have to have a breaking point, and so you kind of have to dial things up.
Yeah, and that's what makes Dick quit, is Batman's putting young kids in danger, is the theme.
Yeah.
So when Batman breaks into this thug's house and takes him down in front of his family, that's when Robin is, like, doing the math, and he's like, I'm out of here.
Yeah, that was an intense scene. That scene was pretty intense.
Yeah. It's funny. I almost wish that Batman had punched the guy a few times and really turned it up to 11. But shoving him against the wall is probably enough to freak out his kid. Or Dick's like, "Can we do this somewhere else?" I'm like, if Batman drags this kid's father out of sight onto the rooftop, the kid's just gonna freak out even more.
Oh yeah, that's not gonna be any better. Yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, Joker's a threat to society and their lives on the line. And if he has to traumatize this kid to take Joker out immediately, then that's acceptable amount of collateral damage, you could argue.
Yeah. Yeah, and also they don't know what the audience knows as far as how much this guy knows. But yeah, putting the kid in there, I think really ratchets things up into the how acceptable is this really to do.
Yeah.
Which it does what it's supposed to do, which makes, I think, even the audience go like, oof, maybe this is too much here, Bats.
Yeah, for sure. I sort of like how, it's funny because he is better with children than he is with adults. And as his kids get older, he changes. It's like he's fine when they're 12 and 13 because he's an adult, they're not, and he's comfortable with that dynamic. But as soon as they become their own individual adults, he's got trouble. And I think that's an interesting thing. Like Bruce's arrested development kicks in, and once the kid is old enough to shave, Bruce changes, you know?
Yeah, I would be interested. You used the word I was just thinking, or a phrase I was just thinking of. I would be interested to see if anybody's ever done a, just for the hell of it, a psychological profile on Batman and his arrested development, because there is that I don't know if it's a theory or what you would call it, that sometimes people stop aging at a point of trauma or something like that.
Right.
And so, is that the deal with Batman, where he is really inside, he's not really much more mature than an 8-year-old?
In some ways, with his toys and his gadgets and his powerful man fantasy, fulfillment fantasies, whatever. I know there's psychologists that have broken this down, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
So I'm sure there's a book like The Psychology of Batman that everyone's read except for us.
I know. Yeah.
People are like shouting at their computers right now, fucking read the book, dude.
The most important thing about this episode, though, is we learn one really important fact that I think you and I knew, but I think Batman finds out in this episode, which is that his jetpack is a piece of garbage, huh?
I know. Stop making fetch happen, Batman.
Yeah. he keeps using it, and in this, I mean, before, at least when he was fighting Roxy Rocket, she also was on a rocket, and he required some jet propulsion to get there.
Absolutely.
This is like taking your kids to school in a Ferrari or something, or an F1 car, where it's like he's trying to do fairly surgical maneuvers with this thing that is just uncontrollable, and all it does is cause him to smash into stuff.
Yeah. Oh man, I'll tell you, there's a lot of great moments in this one for me. Like, I love when Alfred tries to take the rap for being Batman.
Yes. Yeah, that's great.
I love when Dick gets back and the Batmobile's missing, and Alfred's like, "Oh, they went for a drive," and he's like, "What kind of drive?" And I love that moment. I love Joker wearing a pilot's cap throughout the whole finale.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, he goes, when Batman punches the hyenas or kicks them off of him, Joker's like, "Hey, do I ever hit your kids?" Actually, I think I do.
Yeah. I actually thought, I hadn't looked at the credits when I was watching this, and I just assumed Paul Dini had written this.
It's not. Yeah.
It's not, because it had, like, his Joker tends to be pretty good with that kind of wordplay in a way that a lot of the other ones kind of aren't.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty smartly written episode, and I really don't mean that to disparage all the other writers on the show.
Right.
But it just had that kind of zip to it that felt like it was one of his, but it's not.
I'm surprised that Dini didn't write this one. I mean, if I was Dini, I would want to write this one, you know?
Yeah.
I'm curious what the schedule was and what the reason, because, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Dini and Tim looked over all the scripts and were like, all right, let's change Joker's dialogue here. Paul has a better idea for a quick quip about being a pilot. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that happens, of course. But yeah, I thought this was a really strong episode from a writer that I don't normally associate with fives. Like a really a high up there episode.
Yeah. My understanding of how television script writing works is that basically everybody kind of kicks the idea around. This is my knowledge of how it works from listening to the commentaries on the Simpsons DVDs. So if this is outdated, it probably is. Everybody kind of kicks an idea around, and then one writer goes off and writes the script, and then when they bring it back in, everybody kind of kicks it around again, and then the writer kind of does a polish, and then I think there is that in a lot of the modern kind of showrunner situations, the showrunner does kind of take a swing at it and kind of punch it up a bit if they need to.
Yeah.
So it is one of those things where it is one person is credited with the script, but it is kind of like the child of 1,000 parents, kind of.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting process, especially with something like The Simpsons, where there are some instances where they're writing jokes like right down to the wire with them, which some of them are easier to put in than others, depending on if they have to change animation or something like that. But Yeah, I would be interested to know how the production of these episodes works. I don't know if it's in that book that is now out of print, but I'll have to read it someday.
Oh yeah, the one I have. You know what? Next time I see you, I'll let you borrow it.
I downloaded it from that archive link that Joe sent out, so I have it. I just have to sit down and read it.
Yeah.
What did you think about Barbara in this episode? Because I think she's just kind of been another sidekick up to this point in this season, and they haven't really given her a lot of stuff to do except for that one episode where it's all in her head and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I felt like this was a pretty good use of her all around, because they get into the kind of awkwardness of who knows what and who's doing what without really getting too messy with it, but it's still messy enough that you're like, ooh, this is actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, she's ready for a relationship. She's sort of more developed than he is, or sort of more mature, where she's committed to the idea of their relationship. He would like to get there, but then he gets a page from Batman. By the way, seeing a beeper again is pretty amazing.
The idea that Batman is calling him from a payphone on his beeper is really funny.
So everyone, that Batman is not on a payphone. Batman
he's not?
has
Okay.
a cell phone, and Dick uses a payphone.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, because it caught me. I looked up. I'm like, wait a minute. Is Batman literally in a phone booth making a call? Like one of his pouches is just filled with quarters.
Yeah, it's just quarters. Well, if whether or not he needs them to fight Two-Face, he's got them for parking meters and or phone calls he has to make.
Do you think Batman pays parking tickets?
I don't know. Do you think Batman gets parking tickets?
That's true. There's probably a thing on his car that burns the parking ticket the minute someone tries to. I mean, he doesn't have a license plate, so what would the person even write?
That's true. Yeah, and I mean, maybe Gotham City is actually in Portland, Maine. I'm not sure.
You know what? There's a great. So we're getting off topic. If the Batman black and white stories, the short stories. If I ever do one again, I want to do one about the parking meter maid who sees the Batmobile and it's parked in a legal spot, and he's like, "Do I tow this guy?" And he starts to tow it, and he's really, really fucking nervous. And the tow guy's like, I don't know, man. I don't think we should do this. And it's like, I don't know if anybody would like that.
That's pretty good,
except for you and me.
Well, I like the idea of like seeing him do the math of what this might mean in his head.
Yeah.
What the consequences of what happens if he does tow it versus what if he doesn't tow it.
It could be a whole issue, honestly. And he thinks back to when he tried to tow the Joker's moped, and he's like, well, that didn't go well at all. And Batman actually saved me, so maybe I owe him a favor this time.
Yeah, that would be pretty good.
But then you flash back to his boss. He's like, you got a quota to meet, buddy. If you don't tow at least 5 vehicles tonight, then you're fired. And this is the last chance he has to tow a vehicle, and it happens to be Batman's.
That's pretty good, yeah.
By the way, Batman is barely in this.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah, he doesn't show up until the end.
In the end, like, is he in the car the whole time? Does the car take off on its own? Like, what would be the button at the end?
I'm not sure. My first thought is, what if it's from that episode where Batman and Robin get stuck in the time loop?
Yeah.
So the car's there, and they are stuck in time loop inside the car.
He's frozen inside.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is fun fleshing this out. Yeah. So anyway, Batgirl, I like that she's ready, and Dick switches to like, oh, I gotta go, and his excuse is a really childish. Oh, I promised the guys at the dorm I'd help them empty out the fridge.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's really obviously caught between adulthood and childhood because of Batman. So I feel like the themes in this episode are really consistent and very well thought out.
Yeah, I was curious what his excuse was going to be, because I've been watching a lot of the '66 Batman, and one of the things that I never appreciated before is they've got Aunt Harriet, who lives in the Wayne Manor with them. It's Dick's aunt, and she's the only one in the house who is not aware of the Batman and Robin scenario.
Right.
So they always have to keep coming up with excuses as to why they have to immediately leave the room, and it's always something like, Dick, I just heard that the salmon were snapping in the river. We have to go fishing if we want to get one. And Dick will be like, yeah, fishing. We have to go fishing now, Aunt Harriet. I can't study. And she's like, oh, okay. Or it's like, oh, we have to go to I just forgot we had tickets to the baseball game. We have to go to the baseball game.
Yeah.
So they're all along the lines of what he says in this, as far as like coming up with something kind of silly and stupid to get out of it. The thing I was kind of surprised that they didn't do was, and I mean, maybe this is a different episode, and it's probably, this is probably a different episode, but they didn't have Barbara do the same thing, where, because I guess she's not working with Batman at this point, so it makes sense that she wouldn't, but I feel like traditionally, if you were going to do this kind of story, you would have that moment where, like in Batman Returns, remember when Selina Kyle is over at Bruce Wayne's place and they see the Penguin do whatever, and then they both have to come up with an excuse as to why they have to leave so they can become Batman and Catwoman, respectively. Yeah. But I think that's a different episode. I think that's an episode more about Dick and Barbara than it is about Dick and Bruce.
Yeah. Did you? So I'm guessing you like the Batwoman, the Batgirl stuff here too.
I did. Yeah, I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah.
I liked that they kind of were more clear about what Dick and Barbara's relationship was. Like they actually had a relationship.
Yeah.
Because they've like we said previously, they kind of hint at it in the other episodes, like when she still has a key to his sweet Japanese bastard pad, his Asian fusion apartment.
Yeah.
But they've never really gotten into whether or not they were together or what. So it was nice to see that this not only broke up Batman and Robin and Dick and Bruce, but it broke up Barbara and Dick as well.
Yeah. It's funny, side note, it's funny when you're young and you go through different phases of toys, like in hobbies. So you have your detective phase, you have your ninja phase, you have your barbarian phase. And then there's a gap where you kind of grow up a little bit and you realize toys aren't cool. But then when you have your first apartment, you kind of re-enter as a semi-adult, like, I'm going to buy some katanas. I'm going to go back to my... I'm wondering what other adult phases we hit of boys that don't want to grow up. Like, there's definitely the katana phase. I think D&D actually scratches the urge of a lot of nerds as they get older,
I don't know if it's because, like, you can draw a direct line back to Stranger Things, but... There has been a D&D explosion in the past handful of years that is... Oh, yeah. I don't... Let's put it this way. I don't think people our age were playing D&D 10 years ago. You know what I mean? It feels like it's definitely had a resurgence among people.
My roommate... So we have a house, and a friend of ours rents out the basement apartment, and he is DM. And I've been watching him evolve more into D&D in the past 2 years, and COVID exploded. And there's a show called Critical Role, which has millions of viewers.
Oh, sure.
He will watch Critical Role for 4 hours while they game, and go to work and have a discussion with people who have not seen it, and he cannot stop talking about D&D. It's like it's a religion that's taken over his life, to the point where I'm actually thinking about having a intervention of some kind, and I'm not joking here.
Because your tables are all constantly covered in role-playing paraphernalia.
Well, I mean, I don't even want to know what that apartment looks like, because as a landlord, I can't just barge in. It's his space, of course. But when I happen to walk by a window in our yard to see inside, it looks like it's exploded in there with boxes and things. That he's not a very clean person anyway. And when he was building his own D&D props just to help him DM better, it's like, God, when he moves out, that place is... I'm gonna need to spend $50,000 to clean it up. I know it.
He's gonna see you coming, and he's just gonna throw a bunch of 20-sided die at your feet, and you're gonna go down like a ton of bricks, and he's gonna get away scot-free.
There's once where we had a water problem, and I needed to get into his apartment to check a pipe. I had no choice, so I sent the contractor in there, and he comes out, and I was like, "What's it look like in there?" He's like, "Does someone actually live down there?"
Oh, Jesus.
I'm like, I don't even tell me about it, man.
Yikes.
I think legally I am allowed to go into a rental if it's for like a reason like that. Well, I guess I'll let my lawyer deal with it.
I don't know, man. You're going to get into one of those situations where it's like, since he's there, you can't make him leave. And then all of a sudden you're going to come home and he's going to be just occupying the main body of the house. And that's going to be legal for some reason because it's weird eminent domain laws or some shit or whatever.
Yeah. It's funny. I was going to get to this later, but when we do these podcasts, Clay, I'm starting to notice there are two kind of listeners. Ones who really like us talking about episodes, and then ones who prefer us going off topic and talking about business stuff.
Sure.
Because even, imminent domain is the business phrase. And I
don't even know if I used it correctly. So
yeah, sort of. we all know what you meant. Yeah, there's probably some lawyer listening to this who's losing his mind right now listening to you and me talk about it. But I thought I was going to mention this to you off the air. Maybe we should label when we start talking about business stuff so you can like skip ahead if you just want to know this part. If you just want to hear us talk about Batman inside stuff, working in comics or whatever, you can just skip the cartoon stuff and just get right to the chase.
I am not going to do that because that takes too much time to do in the editing process, and I have trouble getting these out on time as it is.
That's fair, yeah. I mean, or if we promise not to get off topic until the second half, so we would label each episode. We do these 2 episodes, and then this is this week's topic of discussion or whatever. Or maybe it's fine the way it is.
I think it's fine the way it is. We've been doing it for 4 seasons.
But people listening now, I almost want Wes to put out a poll that says, do you prefer us talking about the episodes, or do you kind of like it when we go off topic and get into business stuff?
That we can do. We can definitely do that.
Yep.
I'll ask him to do that and see what happens.
Cool. So where were we in all this? D&D, yeah, I'm done with that.
But yeah, just overall, I mean, I feel like we talked about the
What would you draw?
Stuff. Oh, the one thing I did want to mention was the ending. Because they spend this whole episode kind of building up Batman as this. And I do also think you can probably give the way that they portray Batman a bit of a pass because since this is Dick telling the story to Tim, there's probably a little bit of unreliable narrator built in because it's his memories and stuff.
Yeah.
And they they pull it back. And I think this is really wise to do because Batman comes off as so overly intense, like more so than usual.
Yeah.
You can't really leave it there, and so they do pull it back at the end by showing that the guy that he roughed up in the apartment has gone straight and has a job at Wayne Enterprises that Bruce checks in on him from time to time. So Bruce knows what he did, and he's taking care of this guy, which I think is a really important part of the Batman thing that a lot of people can forget sometimes.
Yeah,
that he's always portrayed as being like overly angry and overly violent, but a lot of times they forget the counterbalance to that,
right? Which
is that he also does take care of people and he also does check in on people, and he's not just an insane person.
He's extremely generous and nice and kind in his own weird, quirky way, but he still expresses that. That's why I love that episode from season 1 with the invisible stepdad who was harassing.
Oh yeah.
At the very end, Batman goes to check back on the little girl and just outside her window, and he's gone before her mother shows up. I feel like that humanity is so key because you're right. I mean, Batman can be as brutal as you want, but you really need to balance it with the human element, which is why the last scene in this is so important. The one thing that throws me off though is like this guy has a British accent and it doesn't make any sense, and it just feels so out of place in Gotham.
Yeah, it felt like he was trying to do an American accent at the beginning, and then he just threw it out the window.
They're like, listen, Jeeves, just stop trying to do that. Just use your British accent, whatever. Not every episode is perfect.
It reminded me, I just watched the Movies That Made Us episode about Jurassic Park. And Sam Neill was talking about how they wanted him to do an American accent, and his American accent is terrible. So he started doing an American accent. Then Spielberg said, why don't you just use your New Zealand accent? And so he went back to the New Zealand accent. And then they said, why don't you do something like in the middle? And so that's why his accent's kind of all over the place in that movie.
Yeah, and as a kid, I loved it. Like, I knew this guy was somehow international. But in hindsight, I couldn't remember if he was actually American or not. But it didn't bother me. It made him seem more, I don't know, elevated in some way because he seemed more worldly. But yeah. That's funny because there's so many documentaries about Jurassic Park and Back to the Future. And I feel like I know everything there is to know about those 2 movies from everything I've seen on YouTube at this point. So when the Movies That Made Us announced those 2, I'm like, I almost was going to skip them because I'm like, what are you going to tell me about Back to the Future I haven't already heard?
Right.
And to its credit, the Jurassic Park, that element with Sam Neill, I've never heard that before. So still a great show worth watching.
Yeah, that show is funny to me because the thing that always feels like is missing from those shows is like, oh, we couldn't get Steven Spielberg to talk about this, so we're getting the guy who worked on the CGI model for the dinosaur.
Yeah.
But then you think like that as you're watching, you go like, oh wait, this is the kind of stuff that I've never heard before.
Yeah.
That I would like to hear is the process of, oh, how did they move from practical effects to CGI? Oh, it was this guy sneaking it in during a meeting one time. That's really,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of value to talking to the people who capital W worked on the movie. Not that the directors don't.
I know, yeah.
Going outside of the stars,
Yeah, like somebody who's not media trained. Like Spielberg is a fascinating guy, but he knows what to say. He would easily fall into his bullet points. Whereas if you get the guy that's not used to being in front of a camera and sort of edit him down, I bet he's got more interesting stuff that you wouldn't get out of Spielberg. I'm all for them hiring. Let's interview the janitor and see what he has to say about this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like the Nightmare Before Christmas episode was really fun because they didn't talk to Tim Burton, but they talked to the guy who actually directed the movie that people forget wasn't Tim Burton.
I'm one of those guys.
Yeah, and they talked to the woman who wrote it that no one realizes wrote the movie because they give Tim Burton all the credit, and like that whole episode was like, yeah, Tim Burton didn't really do a lot in this movie.
Yeah, it's funny because for me, there's 3 Tim Burton movies that I actually think hold up really well, and one of them isn't actually his movie.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing I do want to mention because you brought it up, because the listeners to these things always pick up on stuff that I don't even bother to think of, and I'll mention it here because I didn't mention it on the show that I should have, but. You mentioned the episode where the guy turns invisible. We had somebody comment on our Rotten Horror Picture Show coverage of the 2019 or 2020 Invisible Man movie, saying they were really looking forward to me bringing up the Batman connection. And I was like, what Batman connection? And Wes had responded and said, what's the connection? Elizabeth Moss is in the 2020 Invisible Man movie. She also does the voice of the girl in that episode of Batman the Animated Series where the guy turns invisible. Yeah.
Wow, I haven't seen that movie, so I might have made that connection.
Yeah, it's a. Well, we should have had you on. But that's the kind of trivia that I'm always shocked and appreciative when somebody pulls that stuff out of thin air.
You're the archivist by nature. It's just who you are. And this is actually something I was going to bring up later in the podcast because I was just having a brunch with a friend who's also archivist personality. And he was complaining about how it always sucks him in. He never actually gets work done because he's always trying to archive more and more, and it handicaps him from pulling the trigger on things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny. Yeah, you're the more archivist here, and I benefit from your archiving because I don't even have to read Batman comics to write another Batman script.
Well, what's really interesting about that is, and I hope this doesn't lead to me getting fired from the next book, but as you've been moving into the next chapter that you're doing, I find that I don't know that world as well as you do. I don't think.
Right.
Because I never spent as much time there. Like I know a lot more about the classic stuff, and I think the area you're in now, I think you have a bit of an edge on me.
I'm writing by myself for the first time ever on Batman, right?
Well, I mean, that's what the paychecks will say anyway.
Yeah. So what would you want to draw in this one?
The explosion of the jetpack, maybe. No, I really like the Joker. I like the image of the Joker at the end with the captain's hat, the Tommy gun and stuff. That stuff was really fun.
Yeah.
What would be kind of interesting? Like, how would you handle that ransom TV commercial thing he does? Because you could do that, all just on a screen, or you could push in kind of like they do here and do it full frame. Yeah. That might be kind of fun to play with a little bit.
Yeah, so interesting. So I immediately thought of The Killing Joke. I think there's a lot of stuff in there where it's like 6-panel or 9-panel pages where they're each framed with a TV screen, and then it's like moment-to-moment acting for the character talking. Is that the right book? Am I talking about the right thing?
I think they do that a lot in Dark Knight Returns.
Okay,
but I could be
what?
wrong.
It was a Boland illustrated Batman black and white story. That's what I'm thinking.
Oh, okay, sure.
This guy's holding a gun, and I get the moment to moment attempt there, but I don't do that stuff because I think it's still. I get what you're trying to do, and it works, but it's boring, it's stale, and I just don't think it's interesting. Like I don't think 9-panel pages from Alan Moore are that interesting to look at. And I have friends who swear by it and they love it, so I'm not judging those people. Well, I am, but not officially. But I don't get it. I'm like, guys, if I wanted a TV if I wanted this, I would just watch a TV. I feel like comics does something that TV can't do, and we should embrace that. So when you start to draw panels like this is supposed to look like a shot in a movie, it's like, but movies do it better than comics. Like comics should have an illustration, like drawing a character jumping out of one panel into the next is something that only comics can do. And there's a lot of decisions that comics can make in storytelling that TV and radio and cartoons and whatever can't do, and we should be embracing those things. And when I see a grid of television screens where there's a guy on the TV, I just hate that stuff, and I just don't. It's comics trying to be TV, and it shouldn't be. That's my mini rant.
Yeah. I think that's that's an important thing to remember. There's I probably brought this up a long time ago, but when the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie came out on DVD, I bought the DVD mainly because it had a ton of interviews with previous Daredevil creators on it. Yeah. And they do a pretty solid interview with Frank Miller, and he goes through his process of how he managed to figure out how to make Kingpin into his own character and stuff like that. Yeah. And the kind of the button on the interview is a quote that I think about a lot, which is he says, "I got into comics to make them more like movies. I stay in comics to make them less like movies." And because I think that's a tough thing to keep in mind, because there is so much language you can do in a comic that you can't do in movies, and vice versa. Right. That when you try to force one into the other, it never really works that well. Sometimes it does. But I feel like it's very few and far between. Do you get a movie that really feels like a comic in a way that doesn't feel cheesy? And it's kind of rare that you get a comic that feels like a movie in a way that doesn't feel like you're leaving something on the table. Yeah. Like when I hear artists, one artist traced Saving Private Ryan footage from the opening scene there and turned it into something else. I forget the name of the artist. I forget the book. I'm sure everyone here knows except for me. And I'm not judging that guy, but that's his choice to do. But I've always said, again, it's comics trying to be a movie, and you don't have sound, you don't have motion. Don't do that. And tracing feels a little lazy to me, and a lot of people. And it's easy to make fun of people who trace because you can say, "Oh, you don't know how to draw." Yeah, I don't know. I agree though. Lately I've been trying to embrace things that only comics can do. Like I have a page of Bruce breaking out of jail, and I have one panel that feels like it's a movie where it's him jumping over a railing, whatever. It's widescreen. So, and some comic book panels look like movies, and I'm fine with that. The next one is a tiny little figure of Bruce, and as he's running through, jumping down through this prison, it's like little ghostly images of him, but the background is static, if that makes sense. Like when Spider-Man used to do a backflip, you'd see like ghostly images of him, and then like the final one where he lands. So that is a panel that's not trying to be a movie. That's something only comics can do that. So I was really happy to have the, what am I trying to say? I was happy to throw that in there. And then the next 3 panels are just comic book panels. It's not trying to be a movie. It's not panoramic. It's just a static shot of people talking or him pushing a button. And then the thing opens, and then he goes through the thing. It's just moment-to-moment storytelling. It's sort of boring, but it's so clear. And I think part of storytelling is clarity. That those moments work very well in comics, because if you're trying to make every panel a movie, it's overwhelming. And oftentimes it's not clear geographically where things are. There's this artist I'm working with soon, that you and I are working with, and I love his stuff, but he's
trying to make every panel a movie, and he's really fucking good at it. Like, he's doing things that I don't even understand about why does this look like a movie. It's amazing. But at some point I'd say maybe just dumb it down a bit and make it a comic book panel just for clarity's sake, because I just get so lost in these beautiful images that I'm actually forgetting where the hell everyone is standing, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's you can get. I find myself doing that a lot, where if I'm going through a script and I'm laying stuff out, if I'm going to add a panel that's not in the script, it's usually something like that, where it's just like, okay, I've got panel 1 where a certain action is happening. I've got panel 2 where a certain action is happening. I need a link between those that makes the storytelling clear. Yeah. So it's like, okay, then I'll throw in a small panel of somebody hitting a button or grabbing something or you know, their foot, like in Bloody Hell. Yeah. There's a scene at the end of the first chapter where all hell's breaking loose. You know, the gunfires, bombs going off and stuff. And I'm doing kind of like big sort of cinematic panels of guys running away from this gunfire, and then one guy's trying to run after this guy, and the end of the page has to be somebody triggers a bomb that's stuck in the mud and blows everybody up. Right. And I was putting all this stuff in, and I wrote it out, and I was like, what I need here is a little insert panel of just the guy's boot hitting the warhead that's sticking up out of the ground.
Yeah, little beats like that, little indent panels are really effective. I use those too.
Because it also helps with your pacing, right? Because like if especially with something like that, where if you're ending with a big explosion, and you're not doing a page turn, if you've got all this crazy stuff going on and you take a minute to really focus in on something, it breaks the flow and gives you a little bit of space before you hit the big, climax.
So when I got, I worked on a comic, and the writer liked 4-panel pages, and I hate that because you're tempted to make it all panoramic, and therefore every panel is widescreen and feels like it's trying to be a movie. And then the rhythm of a page, if it's a drum beat or if it's a song, it's just like bum, 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 bum. Or if it's a 6-panel grid, back in the 60s, it's like bum, 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 whatever. And by varying the size and shapes and placement of your panels, it's like a page sounds more like bum, ba-da-dum, ba-ba-bum, ba-ba-bum, whatever, like, instrumental music. But it's more varied, so you're almost looking at different notes in a song, and the variation keeps it interesting rather than just like 4-panel page, 4-panel page, 4-panel page, which is also my beef with the Alan Moore 9-panel, but it's just the same fucking thing, and it's purposefully avoiding doing things that comics can do very well. Like, why are you handicapping yourself like that?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I could rant about this all day, actually. I don't want to do
it. Maybe after we finish this season, we'll do a non-specific rant episode about storytelling in comics.
Yeah, honestly, and it's the thing. Going back to the point where a lot of people are listening just for inside information on how to be a comic pro. The problem is we pepper this stuff throughout a podcast, so it'd be nice to put all of this together in one place just for archivist's sake at some point, But there's so many.
I would be
points.
Happy.
You and I have tackled so many things over the past 5 years. Like, I can't even remember.
I would be happy to have somebody else do that for me.
Yeah, exactly. So I would.
What would you draw? Yeah.
2 things. One, I love really tall vertical panels, and there's a moment where Barbara's falling from a building, and Robin sees her from far below. He uses a rocket pack in his bike to like swoop up to catch her. So you could see how that stuff would be really lend itself to vertical panels. So I'd love to do that scene. Yeah. And then I love the scene where Robin quits. From the line where he says, "You don't know him like I do." And he punches Bruce in the face, and he throws the mask down, and he walks away. Like, I could see that being a really potent 2 or 3 pages. Like a big moment like that, you draw the hell out of it. I know I could sell those pages very easily. Yeah. So one of those.
Do a 9-panel grid of Robin punching Batman in the face. No. Cut it up, and sell each panel individually.
Yeah. Has anyone ever tried to do that? You buy a page and you literally scissor the page up and then try to make more money by piecing it out.
I had heard somewhere
Oh.
And I actually did this when I first started for a couple reasons, only one of which ended up being valuable to me.
Oh my God. It breaks my heart.
No. I didn't cut anything up, but I heard that someone purposely worked larger than standard comic size and would do every panel on its own individual piece of paper. So then they could sell each one individually.
Oh, I see.
So I would do my panels, I would do each one of them on a separate page larger than standard comic size, because I wasn't good enough with the pen and the brush to do like to draw smaller at the time. And so that's just how I started out inking when I started inking my own stuff. And I, of course, in the back of my head, I was like, that's brilliant. Instead of selling one page, you can sell 6 different illustrations.
Yeah.
You would probably not shock you to learn, I have all of those in my basement still.
Yeah, I would never do that. And it just, as an artist, too, you want to think of the page as a whole. And if you're doing it on the side, it's like you're more like storyboarding, and then you glue them all together.
It also added a ton of time to my production, which it didn't occur to me until later, because, like, you know, you're doing this. The goal for most people, unless you, some people are insanely fast, but like doing a page a day is a goal that you want to kind of reach. And doing it this way, I was doing like 3 panels a day, and I would do 3 panels, and I'd be like, man, I did like a bunch of stuff today, not realizing that I only had done like half of a page.
Yeah, like looking at, if you do 3 panels, there's these other 3 blank boxes staring at you, reminding you, hey, asshole, you got to start driving faster. Like you're not done until we're finished. So it's a motivator. Yeah,
and the process I work is like, you know, I do layouts, and then I do layouts digitally, and then I'll light box the layouts onto the page. So like I would be doing that entire process 3 times in a day instead of just once in a day. So after the 3rd time, it felt like I had done way more work than I actually had. So, but you know, if you're like, honestly, you could probably do it and make a pretty good amount of money doing it. But like I don't. Because you know, if the stuff is scarce as it is, if you break it up that much more, you can probably sell the panels separately. But I totally understand why you'd want to preserve the entire page as a single artwork.
Yeah, I mean, I worry about gimmicks like that.
Sure,
I would qualify that as kind of gimmick. You deplete the market really quickly.
Right.
Buyers might not like it because it's like adding a new element to the market which they've invested in. Yeah. You know, the closest I've come to that is if I screw up a panel, sometimes I'll cut it out and paste a new one in that's correct. Like I'll cut Batman out, and I'm like, all right, well, here's the better Batman panel. And with this loose panel I have in my hand, I'll just tape it to the back of the art, and when someone buys it, they'll get this pleasant surprise like, oh, look, it's a separate little thing on the back. But maybe I should make a pile of those and just sell them as separate illustrations.
Yeah,
like fucked up Batman panels that I didn't use.
Someone will buy all of them and piece together the art equivalent of a deep fake Sean Murphy Batman page.
One of the first shows I went to in New York, I had a bunch of loose sketches in my studio, and I just grabbed them and put them in a pile. And I had a box on my table at the convention. I was like $5 for whatever. You know, some of them are worth more, some of them are worth less. But I sold through that like crazy. And even to this day, it's been 15 years. People are like, I bought a really great piece from you for $5. Like they think about that show. I get that people commenting about that a lot, and they're like, you should do that again. I'm like, well, I can see why you would want me to do it again. By the way, I'll buy those pieces back from you for $5. Oh, no way.
Yeah, right, of course. What would you rate this one?
I'm going to go 5. Yeah. There's not much wrong with it. It's not Heart of Ice. Like, it doesn't have... but it's still 5 for me.
Yeah, I would agree. I think this is probably one of the better, if not the best episode so far this season, just from like front to back. Animation looks good, story's good, character stuff is good. There's not really much wrong with it.
Pacing's good, dialogue. They've got action, but they've got serious stuff too, and they get through a lot in 22 minutes without making it feel too jammed. So I think, they had a lot to tackle with this one, but they pulled it off, I think. Yeah,
definitely. Okay, that's where I think we're done with Old Wounds. We'll take a quick break. Oh, the other thing I just wanted to mention about this is they apparently included this as a bonus cartoon on the Blu-ray release of the Killing Joke animated movie, which I guess I can see why that makes sense, but it just makes me feel that much more gross about the Killing Joke, the first half of the Killing Joke movie where Batman and Barbara have sex on the roof.
Yeah, I didn't see that one.
Yeah. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break, and we will talk about The Demon Within.
Okay, so I've seen the old junk. Now can I go play some videos?
The whole point of bringing you here was to keep you away from those games for one night.
Okay, The Demon Within, story by... Jesus. Story by Rusty Bjornhole, I'm going to say. That's probably not correct, but...
Bjornhole.
I apologize if I murdered that and made it sound dirtier than it is.
It sounds like Norwegian pornography. I love it.
Teleplay by Stan Berkowitz, directed by Atsuko Tanaka. I probably ruined that one as well. And in this one, Batman and Robin assist occultist Jason Blood when Clarion the Witch Boy takes control of Blood's alter ego, Etrigan the Demon. Note, this episode was the final performance of actor Stephen Wolf Smith, who plays Clarion, who died shortly afterwards, which is that's a bummer.
Yeah, I tripped up. I came across that info when I was doing my research like an hour ago. Just like, oh yeah, I didn't know. He and Billy Zane were both in Titanic and both in this.
Yes, that's true. I actually didn't. I usually feel like I can pick out Billy Zane's voice pretty easily. It didn't. Yeah. He didn't pop out to me as that's who was doing the voice in this.
Yeah. I could go on for an hour about why did Billy Zane not have a bigger career, honestly. Because I was watching the movies that made us, and it was Dirty Dancing, and he was up for the role of Patrick Swayze. So they have this footage of him dancing, and he's awful. Billy Zane is awful. Mm-hmm. But he had all this heat because people were saying he is the next Marlon Brando, and you could see why. And I remember him doing The Shadow, thinking, oh, he thinks this is his Batman thing, and this is gonna. But I don't think his career ever really took off the way it should, and I'm not an actor, so I don't know what went wrong, or maybe nothing went wrong. Maybe he's happy as it is. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's funny in the Back to the Future episode of that too. They have footage of him screen testing for Biff because he was he was supposed to play Biff.
You know, it's funny. The Movies That Made Us is also known as Billy Zane in the background of a lot of these movies.
At least he made it into Back to the Future, but just not as Biff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
He's too good looking for Biff.
Yeah, that's probably true, actually. I don't know. This episode is interesting. The one thing that stands out to me that I know this is a really dumb comic book nerd nitpick is one of the second famous thing about Etrigan is that he speaks in rhymes pretty exclusively, and I was kind of surprised they didn't do that. They have him do one at the end as kind of like the joke before he says, I sent him to his room. But they don't have him do that at all in the rest of it, which I was a little bit disappointed.
I love that beat, by the way.
Yeah, it's good, yeah.
This was the episode that doesn't fit into the series at all, but it knows it. And I love how, because I'm watching this as a kid thinking, oh my God, this is the first time they've acknowledged magic for real. Like superpowers and all these things. Like there's a lot that I don't think they can come back from this, because when you introduce magic into a grounded noir story, I think that irrevocably changes everything. But the way that they handle it is Tim's like, what was all that? And Batman's like, don't ask.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the episode, which I love.
Well, it was funny because I think there's two things in this episode that they've only done one other time in the series.
Yeah.
They've only done magic one other time, which is that Ra's al Ghul episode where he fights the zombies at the end.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And I think, I might be wrong about this, but I think this is the only episode that the only other episode besides the Zatanna episode that features a character who is not specifically a Batman-related character.
Oh, I see.
Because it's this one feels more like a Justice League episode, and it usually if they have like a side character pop up, at least Zatanna they tied it in because like Zatara was teaching Bruce magic and whatever. But I think this is the only one I can think of that has like another DC character who is not generally a Batman related character who shows up. Yeah,
I didn't know who Etrigan was at all when I watched this as a kid. and I felt like
it's a pretty deep cut.
He looks really out of place. Like, you're telling me that a Merlin monster from the 1500s dressed like a Jack Kirby character? That doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm not a big Jack Kirby fan, so I was already strike one, strike two right there. And I'm not a Magic fan, as I've said before. Mm-hmm. However, I really do love this episode.
Yeah, it's pretty good. This is a fun episode. Like that seems to be the core of this episode is let's just do something fun and the next one after this is Legends of the Dark Knight, which is probably my favorite episode of the entire series. And it seems like this season they are very much in the let's just have some fun mode.
Yeah. Yeah. You and I are going to have a serious disagreement when it comes to that next episode, by the way.
So good. Love it.
It's like when you tried to pull, when you claimed that Almost Got Him wasn't as good as it was because you got all snobby on me all of a sudden.
That's fair. I mean,
well, actually,
I think that's fair. I think some people are Almost Got Him people and some people are Dark Knight, Legends of the Dark Knight people. I guess I'm in the latter camp.
Yeah, some people love real fighting and MMA. Some like wrestling, WWF.
I don't think there's anything less. We'll talk about it next.
I'm going to shut this down right now because this could go on for another hour.
Yeah, we've already talked an hour about one episode, so we need to probably wrap this one up fairly quickly. But the one thing that popped out at the beginning is that I think Clarion went too high too quickly on that bid. He didn't even try to get it cheap. He just went straight to $100,000, and I think that's probably what screwed him. Yeah,
and then Bruce went up, like instead of $250,000, he went up to $1 million.
Straight up to $1 million.
Shut Clarion down. And all right, yeah.
So
at the beginning of this, Robin's like, I don't want to be here. There's no other kids here. And Bruce goes, I need to get you out of the house. And Robin goes, I'd rather be at home playing videos. And Bruce goes, I don't want you playing those games. And I thought, did I ever say I want to go play videos?
No, I can't imagine anybody ever said that.
So these are writers in their 20s and 30s who grew up on maybe Atari and then gave up on videos.
Maybe.
Don't know how to refer to it.
Maybe that was just like something their kid said, possibly.
That kid is stupid.
Well,
no one calls them videos.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like it's cool to see Bruce and Tim hanging out outside, not wearing costumes. Like, it's sort of like a father and a son, or brother, older brother, little brother, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Having a more human relationship. I always think that's really nice to have in these episodes.
Yeah, and it's especially coming off of the last one too, where it was so much about how the relationship between Dick and Bruce was so volatile at the end. To see this one where they seem to be pretty cool with each other, Bruce and Tim anyway.
I know. In that other episode, Tim should have said, what are you talking about, man? He just took me to this gallery. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Gave me money to spend. Like, I don't know why he didn't like you, but he certainly likes me.
Yeah, Tim didn't push back at all in that episode and be like, I mean, he's pretty cool to me. You know, we hang out, we talk about stuff. It's
Well, again, Tim has a much healthier attitude overall. He seems to be more bulletproof, and Dick is going to take shit seriously. He's like a goth kid on the inside. He's just going to find drama.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember. Do they kill Tim's dad in this series? Is that how that's the whole thing starts? Is his dad gets killed by Two-Face or something? Okay.
Yeah, and he gets over it. He's not a pussy like Dick is.
Like Batman.
I was in the circus.
Forget Dick.
And Batman.
Yeah. Well, because I remember, and I may have mentioned this in that episode, but I remember thinking that the most different thing about Tim Drake in the comics was, if I remember correctly, he does not have like nobody kills his parents before he becomes Robin. It's just sort of like he gets there in a different way that isn't being tied directly to some sort of awful murder or tragedy.
Right.
Which is it's got to be beneficial to him, at least, if not to everybody else around him, to be the one who's like, you guys maybe should talk to a therapist or something. I mean, enjoy punching people with you guys, but there's got to be better ways to deal with this.
I mean, Tim shows up in this universe and he's like, man, you guys both lost your dads too. That sucks. But like, man, look how horribly it's eating away at them. I'm going to choose to be positive.
Yeah.
I'm going to let it not bother me. I'm going to try to, he just seems to have learned, like, hey, don't let it take over you. Try to find a way around it.
And where does
he gets...
Yeah, I was just gonna say, where does that get him? It gets him irrevocably fucked up by the Joker, that he turns into the Joker in the future.
Yeah, maybe if he had more of a negative attitude, he would have been better protecting himself.
Yeah, maybe.
It's funny. I just threw Tim Drake into White Knight, a brief flashback page, and it's like Nightwing's there with the mullet. We've got Batgirl, Batman, and then there's Tim Drake, who's smaller. And people have always been asking me, where does Tim fit in this universe? And I never had a good answer. So I was drawing the page. I'm like, let's throw him in here. So I sent it to you, and you're like, how come Dick is in it twice? And I go, oh, that's Tim. And he's like, well, you might want to clarify that, because you've gone through a lot of this story. You've never mentioned Tim Drake once.
Yeah. And
I'm trying to think.
And that specific page is during a flashback of Jason as Robin, so it gets a little bit confusing.
So I'm like, all right, how do I fix this? Do I have a little square that has a little asterisk, like, this is Tim Drake? Just leave it at that? Or do I have, Dick is describing a flashback, so he's like, oh yeah, there were other Robins too, ... I'm not really sure how I'm going to fix that, but yeah, I'll find a way.
Yeah. Well, just lean into it.
I think having an asterisk or an arrow pointing to him is like, this is Tim Drake. Just never break the fourth wall once in this entire universe.
Yeah. Well, just do what you did the last time you made a mistake with a Robin and lean into it and base the entire sequel around it.
Yeah, man. Focusing on Jason Todd, it's like I am hell-bent on justifying the mistake I made by switching the Robin orders.
Yeah, well, it's fine. It's all fake. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it led to new art, man.
That's true.
It is
That's
what
true.
it is. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, how do you feel about the magic introduction? Because, it's like you said, it is. You're really opening up another door, and it's one of those things where by the end of this, I feel like you can either go, "Oh, that was fun," or you're going, "Wait a minute, how Batman knows a demon guy? How come that's never come up?" I want to know what the history of that is. Are they going to do episodes where they talk about how he knows a 1,500-year-old demon man?
Yeah. And I think Batman says it best. Don't ask.
Yeah.
You can tell he's exhausted by the idea of magic anyway.
Yeah.
Like, you can tell he chooses not to use magic. He must be overwhelmed by it, and I know a few tricks, but mainly I stay pretty grounded.
Yeah. I feel like this episode does better what Critters was trying to do, where Critters was trying to open things up a bit and get things a little bit larger than life, and it just feels weird and it doesn't work and it's kind of gross. Yeah. This one I feel like does it in a way that's it's, I don't know if I want to say it's more believable, but it doesn't it feels less forced, I think, than the Critters episode.
Yeah. Yeah, do you, as an animation team, would you get excited by this episode, or would you just go like, oh, this sounds exhausting?
I would probably be excited by it, because if you're doing the same, all right, today I've got to storyboard a panel of Batman swinging over Gotham. What are you doing tomorrow? Well, I got to storyboard a page of Batman swinging over Gotham. Whereas this one, it's like, what are you doing tomorrow? Well, so Batman grows spikes out of his chest and then turns into a giant tree and bitch slaps a kid into a candy store, and then a cat turns into a cat woman, and that's a fun week, I think.
Yeah, you know what? When you put it that way, I think you're right. You get to change it. You don't have a normal day in the office.
The guy who hates drawing cars, who has been drawing nothing but Batmobile tires for the past 5 years, finally gets to draw laser blasts and anthropomorphic tree limbs coming off of Batman's arms.
Yeah. If we turn this series into a series of one-shot comics, I don't know if I would want this one, but I can imagine a lot of artists would love to stretch out and play with this stuff,
Sure. Yeah. I think this would be a fun one to do. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember drawing Batman Scarecrow Year 1 in 2005. It's the first Batman I ever drew. And I don't know what happened. Oh, Bruce Wayne was hallucinating, and there was a splash where it was Batman versus Batman. So he's literally squaring off with himself, with fisticuffs and ready to punch himself out. Mm-hmm. And as when I was 25, and I was so excited because I'm like, man, how often do you get to draw multiple Batmans in the same panel? This might be the first time ever we've seen Batman fighting. And looking at this episode, I'm like, oh my God, no. Batman gets multiplied with magic, and I'm sure there's 1,000 other comic book pages in the past where there's other excuses to have doubles of triples of Bruce Waynes, you know?
My one of my favorite comics when I was a kid, because I've always been someone who loves alternate costumes. Like my favorite thing about Star Trek to this day is just the costuming and the ships and the communicator badges.
Yeah,
and so,
man,
like,
you fucking love that shit.
Yeah, anytime a new version of the Enterprise showed up, I would get excited. Or if like someone for the future showed up with a new badge, I love that stuff.
Yeah. You have a whole display case of past Star Trek badges in your office.
Yeah, it's great.
No, that is cool. I got to admit.
And there was an issue of Batman from the 0 Hour crossover that they were doing, like the big, Crisis style crossover where all the realities were blending together. Yeah. And the cover is, I think it's Nightwing and Robin, maybe, in a surrounded by every possible version of Batman. And the inside of the comic is like these realities are blending together, so all of these different Batmen have shown up. It's actually kind of similar to Legends of the Dark Knight, which is probably one of the other reasons I like that episode. So it's like, I think it's Nightwing, is going through Gotham City, he runs into the Frank Miller Batman, he runs into the Kelly Jones Batman with the really tall ears, he runs into the 50s Batman, and it was just so cool seeing all of these Batmen at the same time in one comic. I really...
That is cool.
That was one of my favorite things.
That is cool, yeah.
So to answer your question, no, it was not your idea.
I know that now. I was very naive. And I also did a flashback panel where Bruce's parents are getting killed. And I had 2 gunmen shooting because I didn't know that in the comic it was only one guy.
Nothing has changed.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think the movie media distills a lot of garbage Batman into 10 watchable hours of good ideas. Mm-hmm. I don't think you need to go too far back. However, if you're an archivist like you are, I can see what the appeal would be.
Well, I just mean, yeah. Much like there being the Robin order being messed up. There's the number of gunmen, and also to be fair, there is only one gunman in Batman '89. There's 2 people there, but only Jack shoots him.
One guy is shooting, the other guy is like, "Come on, let's go."
Yes,
so I drew that "Come on, let's go" guy,
okay, sure.
I had to redraw the section of that panel. So when you see it, there's like a weird design. Clearly, there's something missing because there's a weird dead space.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because that is kind of a big for the comics. That is kind of a big change to have another person there. Like I feel like there's an entire story arc built into that if you do that.
Totally, and I get why. Yeah, I wasn't even sure they were looking at the art. I started sneaking stuff in just to see if they would notice. I have one panel where Batman breaks into a guy's apartment, and this guy's got some weed there, and he's got a few joints on the nightstand. Mm-hmm. And I added my own panel of Batman interrogating him, but he's smelling a joint, and he's supposed to be like scowling, like this is illegal, paraphernalia or whatever. Mm-hmm. And instead, I changed his face in Photoshop to make him smile, like, oh yeah, this is some good shit. And I sent it into my editor. Because I'm like, I don't think this guy's looking at any of my pages because I'm not getting any feedback from this guy. And he wrote me back. He's like, we have an issue with this panel. Like, it's hilarious, but I work for, at the time, AOL Time Warner, and we really can't have blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And I wrote back, I'm like, okay, no, good, man. It's actually just was fucking with you. I was just making sure you guys are paying attention.
Nice.
Yeah.
And that was the last time you worked for DC for like 10 years, I think, right?
Yeah, basically, yeah. I didn't get hired for a while, but it wasn't because of that.
I know.
Maybe it was. Yeah, I don't know.
Are you excited for the next Donald Shelton Pepper movie?
What?
That's the name on the marquee when they come out when the kid takes Etrigan to the movies is Donald Shelton Pepper.
Yeah, it's clearly a T2 joke.
Right.
It's Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah, that's. Oh, and there's Kirby Crackle in the background too.
Oh, Kirby Cakes is the cake store.
So both.
Oh, sure. Oh, I see.
Kirby
Cake
store.
Yeah.
And that phasey circle, black circle, little dots everywhere when there's magic in a Jack Kirby comic. It's called the Kirby Crackle, and they use that when Etrigan blasts something or other.
Yeah, man, the amount of language, visual language that guy came up with, that is just like instantly identifiable is amazing.
Yep, totally does nothing for me.
That's fair.
I saw Mignola use it once, and it looked pretty good. But that's something that Mignola can easily do, and it fits his style. If I started doing Kirby Crackle, I don't know. I suppose I can make it work because I'm a visual genius, of course.
Of course, yes.
But yeah, I just don't like Kirby.
Yeah, that's fair. Look forward to your letters. Yeah, the thing about this for me, this episode is like I think it's fun, but I don't think it's much more than fun. Like it's fun to see Etrigan. My favorite part is when Jason Blood turns into Etrigan, his pants rip into the boots that he wears. So those those floppy boots, like his pants rip down and into those
one
boots.
Pointy toe. Is that just, his little booties that he's wearing?
Yeah.
There's like a little pointy toe stabby thing at the end of
each one.
Sure,
yes.
And I don't know what that is, other than one massive hangnail.
But it's like the story is whatever. It's a magic wizard battle. It's fun for me, but I don't know. It's not one that I think I would go back to super often.
Yeah, I should mention I threw Jason Blood into my Curse of the White Knight. It was my friend Tristan, who runs a local comic shop here. He threw the idea at me, and at first I was like, no way, I hate magic. Mm-hmm. Even when I was drawing Hellblazer, I just hated the magic scenes. I would just do all the alleyway smoking stuff first, and then I'd do the magic at the end because I just didn't like drawing. But he said, well, you can just have Jason in there as a quick little nod. And I'm like, well, actually, that makes sense because that's basically what they do with Jason Blood here.
Right.
And then I had this quick thing where Jason has been alive since Gotham was founded in the 1600s or whatever. And Bruce seems to be aware of that. And I do exactly what this episode does, where it's like a don't ask type thing.
Right.
But that's the only time that I've used magic. So I actually had the idea of doing a Jason Blood White Knight spinoff. But then you told me, Etrigan sort of speaks in verse all the time. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to write a bunch of poetry. And I'm like, fuck that. If there's one thing I hate more than magic, it's poetry.
Yeah. Yeah, I was kind of surprised that you threw him in there. I mean, it makes sense, but I knowing your stance on that stuff, it was surprising to me that you opened that door at all.
Yeah, I think that there's value in embracing something that's not your thing, just to give your universe or your book a variable.
Sure.
If you really love using, warm colors, every now and then throw in a cool color.
Right.
Because even if it's not your thing, it does help your book feel more diversified, I guess.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
I'm willing to use, if it fits the book and if it's a fun little key, like I'll break my own rules and throw in a magic every now and then. If I think the readers will like it and think it's a charming little thing, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing in this episode that I did laugh at for quite a while, and I don't know why I found it so funny, was when Batman runs to the end of that alleyway and stops at a sign that says "Not a through street."
I know. I
don't know why.
Clearly,
I laughed out loud for a couple minutes just at that. I don't even know it's supposed to be funny, but I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, it's drawn like you can't get a car in there. It's 4 feet wide. It's obviously not a street, and it's obviously in a dead end. It's 14 feet deep. You don't need the sign there. Like, who is that for?
It has to be a joke. It has to be just throw that in there as a joke about the skinny alleyways and stuff in Gotham.
Well, I thought maybe if the backgrounds were animated by Japanese studios, they didn't know what the sign they wrote was. Maybe something happened like that, but I don't know.
Yeah, for some reason, it feels like whoever did the storyboards wrote that in on the storyboard as a joke or something, and it just stayed.
Yeah.
What would you want to draw on this one?
Maybe as much as I don't like magic, I like drawing rooms with lots of collections in them, like trinkets, and I think Jason Blood sitting in a leather wingback chair surrounded by trinkets and ghostly image, whatever, like with a pentagram on the floor or whatever, I think would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like a splash page of him. What about you?
That's a good answer. I like that stuff in theory. Like I would love to be really good at drawing that stuff. But
that's a JP Leone.
I was just
right
going to
there.
say, yeah, JP was fantastic. As I said in the episode where we talk about him, the thing that I loved about his work the most is how well he could populate a room with stuff, because he would make it feel lived in. Everything, nothing felt like it was just kind of thrown in there randomly. And I've seen and drawn pages like that where it's like the script clearly said, this is a room full of esoteric things and elements and stuff, and it just doesn't feel that way. It just feels like a couple things in a fairly dull room, because I think it's really hard to do that stuff and make it feel legitimate, and have all the pieces that you're drawing, whether or not you want to make them stand out, because that's another thing. It's like, how many of these things do you want to make clear so they're readable, or how much do you want to just kind of make like organized bullshit in the background?
Yep.
And it's tough.
Yeah, there's a few JP Leone pages. I think one was in Winter Men or something, and a guy had a bunch of action figures in a studio. It looked like Tommy Lee Edwards' studio, honestly. It might have been, honestly. And JP is good at like picking out a few of the action figures in the foreground, but as you get away from the focus of the panel, they get more doodly and loose. Yeah. And then there's just shapes as you break off to the edges of the panel, which is a smart way to keep focus. And it saves your sanity, because you don't want to be doing like action figure, collectible, like, vase, whatever, action. Like, you just drive yourself. And I've done panels like that, and I do enjoy it if I have the time. Yeah. But eventually I hit a wall.
Yeah, when I was doing Poser, which was this punk rock slasher comic, there's a scene that takes place in a record store. And my frame of reference at that time was like, okay, so Rick, I'm thinking like Newbury Comics or something. And Newbury Comics has so much crap, like all over in between the records and stuff. Like anywhere there's a surface, they'll put some sort of merchandise you can buy. And so I started drawing these shelves full of crap. And it's like, I was like, I don't even know what to put. I guess it just ends up being like a bunch of boxes. Because it's like, you're not really getting in to see any of this stuff. And then so I keep putting these elements on these shelves, and they all feel like they're kind of like not really there for any real purpose. And I wasn't super thrilled with the way I handled it at the end, where I was like, this place doesn't feel as lived in as I wanted it to.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a trick to that stuff. Next time we sit down with paper, I'll show you what I do, if it helps.
Yeah, please do.
For people who don't live in New England, Newbury Comics is a chain. It's kind of like Hot Topic, but way better. They sell Funko Pops and comics. It's 3 times the size. If you think of like you just look it up online. But yeah, it's a New England chain. I always love going in there because I find that it's clean, well organized. Yeah. And in many cases, it's the only places you can buy comics in your local town or whatever. But there's a chain of like, I don't know, 20 of these things maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like a pop culture store at this point, but it's primarily like a music and movies kind of place. But I always, the first time I went in there, I was like, this is a comic book store, but this is like all CDs and shit. But they still do sell comics. They sell a lot of comics still, actually.
Each one is very individually run.
Yes,
like sometimes you get a manager that doesn't like comics, so there aren't a lot. I've gone into some, and I get recognized, and they're like, hey, can you sign some books? I'm like, sure. And then I'll go into others in a mall, and I'll be like, hi, I'm Sean Murphy. I drew those books on the show. Do you want me to sign them so you can move some more product? And they're like, I don't really know anything about comics, and I don't know if I'm allowed to have people just sign things. For them, they have no idea. Like, imagine if I designed a T-shirt, and I'm like, can I draw on all those T-shirts so they're worth more? Like, they have no fucking clue. That's fine. I don't take it personally.
Yeah, I mean,
but I walk into a Newberry's, and I can normally tell if my offer to sign is going to go over well or not.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure whoever's working the midday shift there is like, some guy just came in and asked if he could sign a bunch of comics.
I mean, I have flat out rudeness of people who are who work in comic book shops who are like, oh, we don't like people to sign the comics because it devalues them. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, all right, fucking asshole. I've gone into shops. I used to get sent a box of comics from DC just because it's like, you're working for us. Here's everything we publish this month. And I didn't have enough room for these comics. I was living in Brooklyn.
Right.
So I would haul them into Manhattan, into Jim Hanley's or whatever the other one's called. And I'd say, can you please take these comics and sell them? Like, I work for DC. I got these for free. There's probably $300 retail worth of material here. Take it. And I just carried this 40-pound box here from Brooklyn. I didn't say all that, but that was the look in my eye. And this fucking kid who works there is like, I'm not really sure how. I guess we can take them. I mean, we can put them out for free. And I'm just like, motherfucker. I was so pissed. I think it was Forbidden Planet, actually. Yeah, like this guy. I think this guy was annoyed because as the manager, he gets to feel like king shit because everyone else looks up to him as the most professional comic book person there. And when I walk in, or any other pro, he gets dethroned pretty quickly. So he got to sort of like pull rank on me and tell me about retail like I don't fucking know. And yeah, I don't know. I should have called back and had that guy fired.
Hey, man.
Because you get that kind of ability when you work for DC.
Maybe the writer and the letterer had already been in and dropped off all their comps and they just didn't want anymore.
That's true.
And he looked at you and said, "Is this that book where Batman smells the joint?" Yeah, we got like 1,000 of those. We don't need any more of those.
Yeah, we got a lot of complaints too about Batman's anti-Reagan understanding of simple marijuana.
I will preface the story by saying I love Newbury Comics. I go there all the time. I've spent a lot of money there. So I did that book Poser, and the deal with Poser was it was produced by a record company that started doing comics, and their gimmick was every issue of the comic would come with a 7-inch vinyl album, which is super cool.
Therefore, Newbury would be the perfect client to carry an item like that.
You would think so, yes. I tried to get in touch with the person who does the comics there, emailed them twice, never got back to me. Then I went into the store and brought it with me, and I brought it up to the counter. It's like, hey, I do this comic. Would you think the store would be interested in carrying it? And it's a single package comic with a record attached to it. And he said, and this is a store which is filled entirely with vinyl albums and comic books. And he said, I just don't know where we would put that. And I was like, what the what? pick one. You. And so it never showed up in Newbury Comics, unfortunately.
You know, and if you had gone to a different shop, it might have gone the other way.
Yeah.
It might have been awesome. So, yeah, you know what? I have a very, I don't know. Do you think I'm a short fuse type of guy, Clay? Or do I lose it pretty quickly?
I think it depends on the situation.
So,
well, I don't know if I would say you're a short fuse guy, but I feel like when you get to the end of that fuse, the fuse remains short. Let's put it that way.
Thank you. I mean, you know me in a while, so you know me in ways I don't in some ways. Anyway, I have a very short fuse with people in comics who are bad at business, and this includes retailers.
Yes.
I feel like I am working my ass off
to
try to go. Yeah, anyone who's listening to this knows I get this tone of voice. I get very serious. I start speaking quickly like I am now. But when I go to a shop like that and people are like, oh, I don't really know where we would put it. We put it next to this tower of records, or do we put it on this tower of comics?
Yeah.
Or we have this empty tower in the middle that we really don't know what to do with. I want to punch that person's fucking grandmother and beat their relative senseless. I just cannot stand, because I work so hard in this industry, which some say is dying. I don't think it is, but I'm trying my best to do 110%, and I meet these fucking meatheads who have no idea what to do. It's like, I am rowing twice as hard, and you are dragging your hands in the water. Like, I want to meet your boss and get you fired. And it's not an ego thing with me. I just hate weakness in the industry that I work in, and I just feel like I'm surrounded by dum-dums when I meet people like that. But on the other side, like Batman, I'm not always just an angry asshole. I try to be as, I care a lot as well. So when I meet an employee who's really good at this job, I will drag them aside and be like, you should be the manager. You are extremely good at this. I don't know what they're paying you, but it's not enough. Honestly, if I needed an assistant and I was signing all day, I would ask for you. So I try to bump people up too, who I really appreciate.
Yeah, that's good.
Anyway. but normally I have a long fuse. But if you're in comics and you're bad at business, watch out.
Yeah, and man, not to keep harping on that one situation, but like that store has kind of like a punk rock edge to it, or at least that's how they present.
It's even worse.
And the book is a punk rock horror book that's a comic and a record. And the guy just looked at me like I had brought him a 600-page fantasy novel that takes place in like, medieval England or something with entirely made of cat. Now that I'm saying this out loud, they probably could sell that, but apparently they couldn't sell the other thing.
Yeah.
That actually
in that case, you would ask for a manager or an adult who's not this guy and come back later on. Like I wouldn't have. I don't know if you gave up or not, but yeah, you encounter that guy. You look for his boss.
I think what they did was they told me the name of the person who does the comic sales, and they're like, contact this guy, and then he never responded to any of my emails. But anyway,
well, it's disappointing.
I don't mean to gripe about it, but it was the one book that I had done where I was like, all right, I feel like I know the slam dunk market for this, and I just could not get anybody to return my phone calls. So.
No, comics has a giant marketing problem, man.
Yeah.
Even all the way up, like the Suicide Squad movie. Apparently, it didn't do well, despite the reviews. They did the same fucking social media blitz that they did for the other Suicide Squad movie, which also didn't do well. Like, they don't learn their lesson. Like, they keep trying the same marketing trick out, and it doesn't work. And I feel like someone in the marketing should just raise their hand and be like, I think we need to market Suicide Squad 2 differently. I don't think we need to be on Twitter as much. I think we should spend our money elsewhere because they spend as much money marketing as they do on the movie itself. Mm-hmm. And when it doesn't pay out, I assume heads will roll. The problem is if you get a new marketing guy in there, he doesn't want to be the guy with the new idea because if it doesn't work, he's going to get fired.
Sure.
But if he's like, what do you mean? I spent all this money on marketing. You can't fire me. His job is safe. So ergo, the industry doesn't learn its lesson.
Yeah.
And it's not just at our level. It's all the way up in Warner Brothers and at Marvel, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's very frustrating. Like, that idiot you ran into, that idiot is everywhere in comics, even in Warner Brothers and Disney.
Yep.
Anyway.
Idiots everywhere. For the record, I would probably want to draw something with Etrigan because I think he's a fun character. But
thank you. Sorry, I forgot to ask you
okay.
what you would draw.
What would you rate this one?
I'm gonna go 4.
4.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll also go 4 because I do think like even though I don't think there's a ton in here, it is a lot of fun, and I think it is. The story feels like it occupies the space it was given really well, where some of the other ones feel like they're really truncated and they don't really get a lot done. But I would say if I'm breaking it down, I would say animation and stuff would probably be like a 5. Story would probably be like a 2. So I'm fine with like a 4.
Yeah.
It's
the stakes are low, but it knows it. It's doing a thing on purpose. So I don't want to dock it. If it's sort of a tongue-in-cheek sort of episode, I don't want to be unfair.
Yeah.
A high 3, low 4. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Mostly, I just don't get Etrigan. Like, why not read? Why does this guy have to look like a Jack Kirby drawing? Why can't he look like a real demon or something? I'm sure someone's done this. But
well, I mean, the reason they're using him, I think, is because he's a Jack Kirby character, and the fun of if you adapt a Kirby character and make him not look like a Kirby character, then there's really not a lot of fun there.
That's fair. Yeah.
There's various examples of that in modern media, but Etrigan's one of those characters that is so much a Kirby character, I think, because exactly what you were saying before, like he's this medieval demon, but he looks like a Jack Kirby drawing with a guy in a cape and little booties. Like that's kind of part of the appeal, I think.
Yeah, it's the mistake's been made and everyone loves it now, so just embrace it.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a mistake. I think it's a design choice. I wouldn't call it a mistake, but
I call it a mistake.
So fine,
but I know what you're saying though. It's like the boob window of Power Girl. It just got bigger and bigger over the years. Her boobs got bigger and bigger, and now they can't even publish her because if they try to bring her down to a B cup, they're going to get slammed by one side. If they leave her at a triple D or whatever, they're going to get slammed by the other side.
Well,
Power Girl is basically dead.
I don't actually know if that's true because I know there's a comic where they managed to figure that out by actually having her embrace it in some fashion, like in some sort of like empowerment angle that I think went over pretty well. So I think that is one of those design elements though, where it's like, it's kind of, that's just part of the design for better or worse. That's like the thing that's identifiable about the look.
I know. When I draw women, I am always wary of the male gaze. And with Power Girl, though, there's really no way around it. There's 2 reasons why you're drawing her. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, sure.
But I have a friend who is constantly pitching DC Power Girl stories, and he's got an artist she's a lady, and you got your protection because you have a female artist, so you're less assailable. And DC keeps telling him, hard no, stop pitching as Power Girl. Power Girl's dead.
Really?
It's not the right environment now. Like, hard stop, no more Power Girl is what he says. And he's been published a lot by them. So
that's really surprising because that's actually a character I was thinking about. I was like, they're not really doing anything with Power Girl. I wonder if there's. And now I guess I know why. All right.
Maybe I'll work her into White Knight. Yeah.
Sure.
I don't know
why
what
not?
I would do with her, honestly.
Yeah. She's actually this has gone on too long, but one of my favorite cartoons that they've done in the past few years is Superhero Girls, which is on Netflix. And the design of that show is really, really great. And they have a Supergirl character who at one point turns into Power Girl. And they managed to figure out how to work that costume pretty well. I don't think she's got the boob. I can't remember if she's got the boob window, but it was like it was a good modern update of the character that looked pretty good. That's a really really fun show. I like that show a lot. But
is this with Melissa McCarthy in it? Is it live action?
No. It's a cartoon. It's done by the woman who did Powerpuff Girls. There's 2 versions of it. There's the first version everybody looks like a Barbie because it was like based around a toy line. So they all look like these like Barbie designs, and it's a lot more quote unquote traditionally feminine. The modern version, which I think is the second version, which I think is a lot more fun, is much more stylized. The designs are really cool. The artwork is fantastic, and it's like it's just like all these DC characters in high school together, basically. So like Batgirl is the new girl in town, and Wonder Woman goes to school there, and Supergirl goes. It's really fun. I recommend it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think I've seen that on my radar. I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah. But that's going to do it for Old Wounds and the Demon Within. We're almost done. We've only got 3 episodes of our show left. And next time, we will be doing Legends of the Dark Knight and Girls' Night Out.
Oof, 2 whiffs. Yeah.
I don't know about that. Thank you guys for listening, and we will see you next time. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, man.